I'd like to remind people that the meeting is being recorded and streamed live on the internet. All care is taken to maintain privacy for people in the gallery, but if you're submitting a question, your presence will be recorded. I will remind people also to speak right into the microphone. Nala Kadic wajak mort kan karak nija walila butcher, where jinang wajak kadijin, where knitting bula yeye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. We have Councillor Sullivan is on leave of absence. We have Councillor Thompson and Pemberton both running late. Councillor Thompson possibly significantly late from an MWAC meeting. Councillor Pemberton not hopefully very late. So leaves of absence, I have an application from Councillor Pemberton for a leave of absence from 20 January to 27th January inclusive. So if I can get someone to move that, Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Are there any other leaves of absence that I haven't noted down here? Councillor Moughlin?
Yeah, I'll actually put one for that same week, and I'm not too sure if I'll use it, but I just want to make sure it's available.
All right,
yep,
so Councillor Moughlin for the same dates. So we'll move that one. Councillor Lang's moving it, seconded by Councillor Lorva. All those in favour? Great. Anyone else? Okay. So disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest in relation to items on the agenda tonight? Councillor Lang?
Yeah, disclosure of interest on PC item 6, and I'll leave the room for that.
And so the nature of your interest is?
Proximity.
Proximity. Great. And Councillor Moughlin?
So I'll declare a very tenuous interest in item 4 in regards to the Freo Farmers Market, in that I formerly had a role as the chair of Fremantle College, where the market's currently located. And so an impartiality interest, and I'll still participate.
Great, thank you. Any others? Good. Okay. Responses to previous public questions taken on notice are included in the agenda. So that brings us to public question time. Currently have 5 people listed to speak, but I will check at the end if there's anyone here who had intended to speak and hasn't had a chance to. So Ian Kerr is our first speaker. Ian, you know the drill. 3 minutes into the microphone. All yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I'm speaking to the discussion on the motions from the special elections meeting of 14th of November. And I must admit to being more than somewhat underwhelmed by the officer recommendation for this item. Those of us who were at the meeting, were among the 140 members of the community who were there, will be well aware of the strength of feeling and opposition to what is being foisted on us in the guise of the Swan River project. The resolutions passed at that meeting were not mere expressions of preference, but were based on deeply felt concerns for the future of Fremantle, and more broadly, the repeated and continuing failure of democratic and consultative processes. Throughout the Swan River Crossings project, it has been the community that has done most of the heavy lifting. In August 2020, it was community pressure prompted by Main Road's announcement of a bridge alignment that had previously been rejected by the community back in 2006 that brought about some genuine consultation through forums and public meetings. It was community input at those forums that led to a different alignment being announced by the Minister for Transport in August 2021. It has been the Fremantle community, now joined by the East Fremantle community, that has vigorously objected to the current proposal and the secretive way in which it was developed. Now, as an aside, a bit over a year ago, Councillor Sullivan, when he was Deputy Mayor, said on Channel 9 that the problem was that, quote, we're leaving the design of our cities to people who build freeways. And the current design out there looks very freeway-like. Now, I agree with that, but I'd also add that professionals of all ilks, including planners, urban designers, and architects, have all shown themselves capable of producing outcomes that take no account of people and what they want. And the common factor here is all too often an unwillingness to actively involve the people who live in, work in, or otherwise form the beating heart of a place. The officer's comments on the resolutions passed at the Fremantle electors meeting fail to reflect the strength of feeling of those at the meeting and appear to be designed specifically to avoid councils expressing a direct view on the resolutions. Indeed, the response to resolution number 5, that it was addressed to the Minister for Transport, does not even relate, as some of the others at least do, to any decisions of or views previously expressed by Council. In the absence of any supportive commentary from Council, simply receiving the minutes of the special electors meeting and forwarding a copy of them to the Minister and the Fremantle Bridge Alliance will achieve absolutely nothing. We can be certain that the Minister, Main Roads and the Alliance are already aware of the resolutions passed by that meeting. And if Council does not add some value to those resolutions, they will simply be filed and forgotten. Compare this response with that of the town of East Fremantle, which at its council meeting last night specifically and unanimously supported the resolutions of their special electors meeting. Councillors, I urge you, no, I implore you to adopt a proactive position that values and supports the Fremantle community you are here to represent, rather than destroying it through disinterest. Even more, I've been told that if both East Fremantle and Fremantle councils oppose the current proposal, it will not proceed. Your active support for the electors' resolutions, especially Resolution 4, could achieve a complete reset of this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ian. Shani Graham on item 4.
Hi, I'd like to speak to agenda item 62212 regarding the council sponsorship of the Fremantle Farmers Market. The market is obviously a valued community asset, and I feel like this aspect of it is well articulated in the officer's report. But I'd like to share with you some results of a survey of market goers that I completed with my partner last year. We surveyed 200 people in late 2021. Over 70% of those people spend over $25, mostly over $50 at the market. People are dropping in for more than a coffee. That is money going to local small businesses. 58% of them people came to the market every week, and 66% of them stayed for between 1 and 2 hours. They're spending money and they're hanging around. 23% of Fremantle residents came to the market from Beaconsfield, which is the only suburb in Fremantle without some sort of recognised centre besides sports ovals. Others were mostly within cycling distance, 19% from Fremantle, 17% Hilton, 17% White Gum Valley, and fewer from North Fremantle and Samson. Here's where it's interesting. Of those surveyed, 1 in 5 came from outside of the Fremantle area. 40% from Coburn, so let's not lose the market to them. 29% from Melville, 12% from the western suburbs, and then country areas, Armidale, Stirling, Kwinana, Rockingham, and somebody from Joondalup. Those coming from outside Fremantle were asked if they stay in Fremantle after being at the market. 42% were planning to go to a cafe for lunch, 10% to stores in town, 42% to get more groceries, mostly at Manor, and 21% to the beach. To summarise, I feel like the markets are assisting the council in the outcomes of their strategic plan in more ways than just community development. People go to them to spend money and they stay for a long time, supporting small local business. The market attracts people from outside of the Fremantle area who then stay in Fremantle and spend more money, spending more time supporting local business. The market also provides a much needed hub for the suburb of Beaconsfield, which currently does not have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Shani. I've got a question, I think, from Tanu Hudson.
Cool. So I'm just saying stuff from last question got answered, and that's kind of got me more questions. So I applied for a Freedom of Information Act on documents concerning the tenancy of JShed Unit 1 and the other ones as well, but I didn't get much info from that. It revealed the current tenant didn't really address any of the EOI criteria very thoroughly in their application, from what I could see. For example, the applicant states public interest in stone sculpture, which I'm sure is a pretty small part of the population compared to people that are interested in music and canvas art and theatre and other parts. And it doesn't really allow the space to be used for the broader interests of the community. As mentioned in the original EOI, getting people down, the general public, to interact with arts and culture, activates the West End, getting visitors to the space. So I haven't seen that happen. Further, the lease agreement indicates that the proposed rent awarded was significantly lower than indicated in the EOI. So they managed to get it for 40% of the asking, which was $400 a month for the first 3 months, and then $600 a month thereafter for the last 3 years and 11 months. And while the current tenant's application does include things such as having the space open to public view, in progress and proposed activation activities, there hasn't been much going on. It's closed most days from every time I've been down there, and I haven't seen any events or any open exhibition information or advertising for it. Current tenant had the opportunity for the space for the community's benefit since 14th of January 2019. Even given COVID, that's a lot of time before and after to get something going down there. So my question is, how was the selection process conducted? Like I mark people at Murdoch and usually have a criteria and a rubric and get all that, so I'm not sure how that's been done. Why was the current tenant selected when other applications more thoroughly addressed the criteria, in particular providing the space for cultural public activities, and even offered to pay the full rent as proposed? And the second one, has the city conducted any audit over the period of the lease to ensure that the space is open to the public and the proposed activation activities have actually taken place over the last 3 years, 11 months? Cheers.
Thanks, Tanu. And if you've got those in writing, it would be good if you could either email them through or hand them up. Yeah.
What do you want, like all the things?
Probably just the questions, because we will have to take those ones on notice.
Yeah, I've got that pretty much.
Cool. Thank you. All right, Sally Matthews.
Hello. For the benefit of the audience, I'm speaking on the issue about the Swan River crossings that, in addition to what Ian Kerr spoke about. And I am a resident of the East Fremantle community, but I do have a business in the Fremantle area, Fremantle in the West End. And last night, East Fremantle Council rightly voted unanimously to endorse all motions brought to the East Fremantle Council at their special electors meeting about the current Swan River Crossings project. The first motion passed at the East Fremantle SEM was for the East Fremantle Council to publicly oppose the crossings project in its current form. There were a lot of attendees at this SEM meeting at East Fremantle, and unfortunately some had to be turned away due to capacity issues. I am aware that the City of Fremantle had a similar special electors meeting with the same sentiment being expressed of opposing the Swan River Crossings project in its current form, voiced by a number of members of the Fremantle community. My question is, does City of Fremantle support their community's views on this?
Thank you. We'll take that as rhetorical. And John Dowson is the last speaker that I have listed, but if you're thinking that you would also like to say something, I will give you an opportunity after.
Mayor and councillors, good evening. I've got 4 issues I want to raise in 3 minutes. Number 1 is the 6-storey hotel. Number 2 is the Triangle, William and Parry Street. Number 3 is the special electors meeting. Number 4 is the tin roof you're going to put on the Arts Centre roof. Number 1, the 6-storey hotel. While agreeing with Councillor Archibald's suggested addition, the Fremantle Society sees no good reason for any extension to a damaging project deemed unacceptable to Council, and we ask the Council refuse an extension. The second item, PC 221213, the triangle of land, William and Parry Streets. Now, this project should have gone out for public comment, given it is public space and not just the entrance to yet another alcohol venue. Currently, it's an inoffensive car park, earning $90,000 a year, with grassed areas and palm trees which don't block views to the prison. 3 questions. How are the palm tree replacements, that is jacaranda trees, better for protecting views to the prison? B, why are there no replacement grassed areas, but what seems to be mostly harsh paving? And C, where is the interpretation of the significance of the site, its link to the prison, the value of the existing walls and the adjacent cottages? I just think that project seems to me to be very heavy on concrete and perhaps not quite as relaxing as even it is at the moment as a car park. The electors meeting, we agree with what Ian Kerr and others have said, that it seems that council, their response to the electors meeting is tepid at best, and especially tepid in motion 3 by Isadora Noble. The council says that they voted to demolish the bridge and replace it, despite evidence to the contrary that the bridge actually, with $26 million spent on it, got a long life left. So we really urge council to be a lot stronger in that, like East Fremantle, in their support of the bridge. Finally, the replacement of the Arts Centre roof with tin. Can I ask that, I think everyone's got a letter, is that correct? A copy of a letter I passed around. If you have time to read it, please. It's by one of your former heritage officers, making very strong points about why you shouldn't have tin. And we just want to say that the building is so important that what you're voting on, if you vote for it, is a shocking outcome for one of the very best buildings in Fremantle. As former city architect Agnieszka Kira said today, it is a cheap solution to a place that has potential to be a World Heritage Site along with a prison. Please do read this letter from Michael Willicombe, which I've handed out. There are sensible economic alternatives to keep the character of the former shingled building, even if original shingles are not used. And even, finally, I finish with, in Council's own 2020 Conservation Management Plan, it states, 62, clause 62, upgrade remaining untreated asbestos cement roof coverings to the original building as required. Upgrade. It doesn't say downgrade, it says upgrade. And I just point to that church over there. Can you imagine if that had sheets of tin on it, what it would look like? Well, that's what you're doing to probably the best building in Fremantle, the Arts Centre. You're putting sheets of tin on it, and you should not be doing, look at that church. That's got the proper roofing, and you should really go for the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else in the gallery who was hoping to speak on any of the items or with a question? No? We're good. Okay. So I will quickly whiz through the other bits of business. I will look to reorder the agenda based on the items that we've got people in the gallery waiting to hear. So I'm not aware of any petitions unless the elected members are. Nope. No deputations, special deputations or presentations. I'll move that we confirm the minutes of the last meeting, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. I'm assuming everyone's comfortable there, decent record. Yep, so all those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. So elected member communication. Anyone? Nope. Okay. So that's going to take us to reports and recommendations for committees, from committees. So I'll bring forward the Freo Farmers Markets and the special electors meeting, because I think that's the key people we've got in the gallery, unless I'm misreading anyone's interest in being here. I might do the Farmers Markets one first, because I suspect it will be quicker, but we will see. All right, so I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation for the farmers markets, seconded by Councillor Archibald. Is there any discussion or debate on this one? Councillor Vusic.
Right, yeah. Look, the markets are a really good community asset. With our help towards these markets, how does that compare to, say, the South Fremantle markets in terms of their support, financial support?
All right, so I might throw that to the director in terms of the structure and amount of support.
Through the chair, the intent is that it would be a similar level of support to any future South Beach markets that we run, and currently it's in the form of waiver of fees, no cash contributions.
Councillor Groom.
Yeah, another question. So some of the correspondence we've had in over the last 24 hours kind of talks about an increase in fees, and what's not clear to me is this proposal addressing that, or will there still be increased costs for stall holders because of the change of location?
Through the chair, I'll have to take the question on notice about increased cost to stall holders, but certainly the cost to the city is reducing compared to something like the South Beach markets. I couldn't speak for the situation previously though, for this particular farmers market.
Do you want to ask for advice from the manager? Or?
Can I continue that line?
Yeah.
Like, I'm broadly supportive of the proposal, but I am trying to understand whether we actually get a sustainable outcome from it. So obviously there's generators. Having been to the markets in this alternative location, there's a huge loss of amenity, and so I'm wondering what that means for attendance and so forth. Are we really talking an interim solution, and we need to be working much harder to find a better thing, or is this a viable solution?
Through the chair, what we are trying to encourage is other sources of funding to support the market. So whilst our contribution might be coming back a little, we are working with the market operator to bring in other external sources of funding. So potentially that cost to stall holders wouldn't change, and sustainability over the next 3 years would be maintained.
Perhaps if I could contribute to the debate in responding to some of that. Look, the markets are much loved where they are, but it's a piece of land that is not controlled by the city and is there at the pleasure of a effectively, private, public, but private a landholder. So that I think what we've looked to do in working with the market operator is look at bits of land that we control, which does limit it a little bit. And I think everyone has great ideas of bits of land that we don't control that would be lovely to have a farmer's market on. What I am interested in is the uplift of that area more generally. And I think, you know, what we do know about Beaconsfield is this point that's been made that there is no heart. The proposed redevelopment of the TAFE site gives this kind of opportunity around heart, and I'm quite interested in how we might partner with state government to say, well, you know, here's a existing, thriving, beating heart that might fit quite well in a future, you know, and in a planned way in a development, which is where I think also there is a bit of opportunity around additional funding and sponsorship is, you know, as that area starts to change, you know, are there people who want to sort of find a way to engage with the community and understand them better through the farmers market? So, yeah, I share your concerns that, you know, we've sort of got an expectation that over time, the amount of fees that we're waiving, we'd like to see that reduce. But I think there's good opportunity to knock on some other doors there as well. Councillor Kamada.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to reiterate those comments by the Mayor. I've had numerous conversations with the operator and also many of the stall holders. It's been a roaring success, the development of those markets. And unfortunately, though, the school has and the markets have both grown to a level where they cannot coexist any longer. We've been through, explored so many different alternatives, and the best option we've got to go with is what we currently have in front of us. And I think it's a work in progress. It is very important for that area to keep those, or to at least attempt to keep the markets in that area because of the very reasons that the speaker that spoke tonight illustrated. And so I'm very supportive of this. It's going to take the amenity and the feel that you get within the school. It will be hard to match initially, but I think it's something that we can all work towards, particularly in view of what's happening in that area with the TAFE development and the Heart of Beaconsfield project. It's something that we can all work towards to go to bigger and better things. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to start by acknowledging the work that staff did around trying to identify a new home for the markets when it was seen as an issue, and essentially looking over the entirety of Fremantle to find a site and working closely with the market operator to find what was the best solution, and acknowledging as well that the site at Fremantle College and formerly prior to that South Fremantle High was the home, but it both of those, as Councillor Kamada said, have outgrown each other. What I suppose what I'd like to see is that we do have Bruce Lee Oval as a location that on the weekend is having mixed levels of uses, and I think the opportunity to catalyse something in the future is pretty special. And even if we start to look at the sports that are played there on the weekend and the markets coexisting, I'm pretty excited that we might be able to see a new location that helps to build that both community and economic outcome. I suppose sharing Councillor Groom's concerns about the infrastructure and the like in and around there, and if there are then requests which come from the market operator about upgrading and other bits and pieces to support the amenity, well, that's something that we'd need to look at that time. But I would like to think that staff maintain that close relationship with the markets and stay on top of where it's heading.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I think we'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Good. Let's hope Kylie is watching online. And she did give an apology she couldn't be here tonight. Okay, so that's going to take us to the special electors meeting, first C item. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, and if I can get a seconder for that. Councillor Mofflin. Okay, so I don't know if we want to have a discussion or go straight to Councillor Archibald's proposed amendment. Seems to be Councillor Archibald's proposed amendment. If you could pull your microphone down a little bit towards you, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's a pretty simple amendment, and to some extent, I guess the council put a lot of their feedback into the information that we did send through to the state government prior to the electors' meeting. So I guess to some extent we were simply then taking the electors' meeting, say, okay, we accept this and we'll move this on too. So I put the amendment forward just because I think it is important to just reiterate what this council does feel about the proposal as it currently stands, and to encourage the state government to have more dialogue with the community as soon as possible. And that very much for me would mean with both East Fremantle and Fremantle, because one of the things that I was very struck by when I went down to the foreshore when SOS was running their booth on the foreshore was just how many people use that sort of boulevard, if you like, along there. And a lot of East Fremantle people on weekends come into Fremantle, and a lot of Fremantle people go back the other way. So I think it is a very important area, and so it really does need to have more special consideration. So other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward, so I'm happy to move that.
And I'll grab a seconder for that. Councillor Lang seconding it. Councillor Lorver, did you wish to speak or second?
I was just going to offer to second the
Okay. I was waiting for a little break in proceedings. Councillor Lang, did you want to speak further to that one? Councillor Busick.
I don't think it goes far enough. Acknowledges. I think a word like endorses might carry a little bit more gravitas, and maybe link in a little bit more with East Fremantle. I do think it needs to have a little bit more gravitas than what it is at the moment.
I'll take that as a comment to the mover. Yeah. No, I mean, if you wish to in closing or want to change any of the words that you've got there, I don't, unless there's the formal, I guess, desire to add something in, possibly we'll do that after this is voted on. Okay. I mean, look, I'm happy to support this on the basis that I think it echoes the principles document that we had that came to council previously. I'm interested, I think, in the original line of thought that the electors' meeting pursued, which was we want to see options, and that feels to me like the most consistent message that I've had from both people who were or weren't at the electors' meeting, and certainly that's been the sense I have had as an advocacy position since, in fact, this council asked for that position prior to the electors' meeting. To go any further than this, to me, would be to then prejudice the idea of options. So I think for me, it's important to say if we're calling for options, we have to acknowledge that we're calling for options and that we're not saying we want options, but not that one, because that's not really a kind of unbiased call for options. So I'm comfortable because I think it's aligned with the principles document, and I think to go any further would be perhaps detrimental to the cause of seeing some options publicly discussed. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, just a comment. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Vucic that it could be a little bit stronger, and I also, and it's just my opinion, I agree that number 4 in the motions that were brought up at the electors' meeting, I also support that really strongly, and I just want that on record. Thank you.
Okay. So we might continue to debate this amendment, but if anyone wants to move a subsequent amendment, we'll consider whether that's minor or not. Obviously, if it's not, then you've missed the opportunity to give notice of it. But anyone else on this amendment? Yeah, definitely. Or Councillor Groom before you close, yeah.
Yeah, I thank Councillor Archibald for bringing the amendment, which I think is an important way to strengthen and add kind of our views and perspective into the motion, which was otherwise pretty just kind of bland on that front. However, I wouldn't support a change to the wording because we don't necessarily, well, I personally don't necessarily endorse all the concerns that were heard. There's a range of positions, and as the Mayor pointed out, we are entering into and heavily advocating for an options process, which by its very nature should bring a whole range of positions to the table. So I'm comfortable with the motion as worded, and I don't think any change or the proposed change would reflect a previous position of council.
Councillor Moughlin.
Yeah, I'd just add that, I support the amendment, and particularly because it, essentially reflects that position that council came to in the October ordinary council meeting, and I think it's reasonable for us to tie those two things together. So thanks, Councillor Archibald.
Councillor Jones.
I just support that. I think to describe this as the council's response to the project as being tepid, this is not the council's response to the project. This is the council's response to the electors' meeting. The council already put in a very well considered and detailed response in October, and this is an addition to that. And I think what we did was quite proper. I think there are some serious questions about the traffic flows that were listed in the study. I think there are some serious questions about the whole thing, and to get the whole thing assessed with various options on the table, I think is the right way to go, not to preclude. It may well be, after a fully comprehensive analysis, the current proposal is the best proposal. I can't imagine that, but it may well be the case, and to preclude it at this point seems premature. So, I support the amendment, but I wouldn't support it being any stronger than that.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Archibald, to close.
Thank you. Yes, look, the words were chosen quite carefully. They are supported by some of the community members that I have been in touch with. And I think that is the point, that we are asking for a proper analysis of options. That didn't happen in the first round, and that's what we're seeking. So while I'm not particularly fond of the Beach Street proposal at all, and I fail to see how it is a good idea, but that's a personal opinion. I still believe that we need to look at options, and that was our whole argument. So I would prefer these words to stay the way they are, and I also don't believe that we have a position as a council about some of the other issues that were being raised by the public. I think they're issues that we need to work through appropriately. So I would prefer to stick with the current wording.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. So I will put this amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Yep. And against? And that's Councillor Vusic against. So we're back on the item now as amended. Any further discussion or amendments? No. All right. Well, I will put the item as amended to the vote. All those in favour? And against? And Councillor Vusic against. So that's carried. Okay. I think we are probably going to go back to the agenda as printed, because I don't think anyone else here is here for items. So that takes us back to South Terrace 65. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, or I don't know, Councillor Jones, whether you want to move it. And
well, just to explain, we had two people.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Good on you. Or not.
You need a badge. Let's go that way. No, we had two people declare an interest and two people absent from the meeting, so we had three people left. So we didn't have a quorum to even discuss this. So it's not referred to council for decision. It simply has not been discussed at all. And Councillor Archibald has an amendment. So I will move the officer's recommendation, which is to advise that the council supports the extension.
Yep. Seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Good stuff. Any discussion on the item, or do we want to go straight to the amendment? All right, let's go straight to the amendment. Is anyone else feeling like we're a bit tired tonight?
Last meeting. Let's go for it.
Long haul.
Okay, well, I'll move my amendment. And again, this is still pretty straightforward. I just feel that as a council, we've had a lot of challenges in working with JDAT. over the years. Ironically, the last decision we saw go through there was actually more favourable to us, so it was a bit of a surprise. But I do feel that we need to reiterate those moments when this council did take a decision not to support the proposal, and to just remind the state government that that's the position we took. That said, I'm very aware that this is going to get its extension, so I'm a realist. That's the purpose of it.
Thanks. Councillor seconded. Oh, sorry. Again, Councillor Lawver.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this motion, and I too, or this amendment to the proposed thing from staff. And I do wish that we could be a little bit stronger in highlighting that we do have policies and that those policies aren't just made up out of thin air. But I appreciate what Councillor Archibald put together here, and I think it sends a good message.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I just want to use the opportunity to.
Hang on. If you speak, no, we're on the amendment. Good. Don't worry. Carry on.
Yeah. On the amendment, yeah. I think it's important to put this amendment in because I'm seeing a much greater willingness on the part of the SDAU and JDAP to totally disregard the town planning scheme and the structure plans and the other policies that we have in place. The various items going through council at the moment, the Matilda Bay brewery site, Ford factory, the majority of the JDAP members seem quite comfortable to increase the height by 60 metres above what the town planning scheme says. It's been deferred, it's not been approved, but height was not one of the reasons for deferral specified, although it still is in play for other reasons. The application for the wool stores at the moment is split into three. One of them, the Coles supermarket part, will come to us to go to JDAP. The other part, at the other end, is going to SDAU, which still exists, where the council isn't represented at all, and that's shown on the plans as 14 stories. And interestingly, on the plans they show town planning scheme height with all bonuses applied, height of building, right? So there's not even an attempt to say that it complies. A thing that concerns me is that the whole thing hinges on having given due regard to the various policies and town planning scheme. Now, in the case of Matilda Bay Brewery, I'll just take a bit of time to say this for the benefit of all councillors, because they may not understand this, that the Heritage Council is not a listed building, so the Heritage Council didn't make a formal response, but the chair of the Heritage Council did and said it should not be approved. Our officers wrote a very strong recommendation for refusal. Our Design Advisory Committee wrote a very strong recommendation for changes and refusal. It didn't meet requirements for traffic, and it didn't meet requirements for parking. And the general tone of the JDAP meeting, well, it's fairly close to being approval. It just needs a little bit of a nip and tuck, and we'll defer it, you know. And then in the pipeline too, we now have the One Steel site starting their structure plan process, which is they're starting at 22 stories. So if their structure plan says 22 stories, presumably they can go to 44. And I think we're sleepwalking into this in Fremantle. There is no site in Fremantle, in my view now, that has a height limit. Possibly the West End heritage area, because the one thing JDAP cannot ignore is advice from the Heritage Council. Unfortunately, the Matilda Bay Brewery is not listed, which is incredible. It's not listed at all on the state register. It's listed on it was investigated, and the report was done for listing in 2005, and the Minister of the day decided not to proceed because the owner didn't want it heritage listed. As simple as that. And that we've got that in writing from the chair of the Heritage Council. It's not rumour.
Yeah, I'm just channeling Councillor Thompson to sort of say maybe bring it.
Sorry?
I'm channeling Councillor Thompson, who, if you were next to you, would suggest that maybe it could come back to South Street.
Yeah, so I know it's not directly relevant to this, but I think the reason we need to keep reiterating we have approved this bill. This is only a little bit outside the scheme. The sort of things that are coming out now are 50%, 100% higher than or more. So, and I don't see the sort of groundswell of opinion from the community or from the councillors to sort of deal with this. And the idea that someone has a 5-storey height limit on South Street or a 5-storey height limit at the Sea Lane site, for example, is I think 5 to mostly 5 stories. The Sealand site is bigger than the Matilda Bay Brewery site. Okay, it's bigger, and it's got a 5-story height limit on it at the moment, which to me can now be fully ignored. And just a final point is this whole idea of due regard in law. If a judge has to have due regard to certain criteria, they need to explain in their decision every single one of those criteria and why they've decided to disregard it. And each judge, if it's a panel, has to give their reasons or agree with the majority reasons. Now, when JDAP is very careful when they refuse things to give very clear reasons for refusal, because refusals are appealable, right? And they often say in the meeting, we need to be very careful, we need to have very strong grounds for refusal. They never say we have to be very careful, we need to have very strong grounds for approval, because approvals are not appealable in Western Australia. I think there's a really fundamental issue there, that a JDAP person only has to say, I've given due regard to the Heritage Council, due regard to the Design Advisory Council, due regard to the Town Planning Scheme, due regard to the Structure Plan, the Traffic Plan, the Parking Plan, but I've decided it's okay. And that's it, you know. And I really think we're reaching a crisis in Fremantle, to be honest, and we seem to be sleepwalking into it. So I just take the opportunity for the amendment to make those points. I think it's very relevant here. It's even more relevant on the stuff that's coming over the next 3 months.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Grimm.
Yeah, again, thank you, Councillor Archibald. You've been doing the heavy lifting. So I voted against this project, even though in many ways I think it's a great addition to Fremantle. And the reason was for the very reasons that this outlines, is that it was not at all anticipated in our strategic planning framework, and the whole nature of the planning system should be that people can expect the planning outcomes that they're consulted on. And as Councillor Jones has just described, that's no longer the fact, but there is no harm in us continuing to return to that as a base. So I was really struggling with this extension because I didn't want to be churlish about it, but I think this is a really elegant way of stating that. So I'm very supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Grimm. Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I suppose maybe I was a bit in between on whether I supported the amendment or not, particularly considering that the question put to us was whether we supported an extension. And you know, hearing the discussion around the room, certainly I yeah, still maybe undecided as to whether I do support it, but noting that you know, putting these words here, which really you know, are at the peak of the sentiment that council has about its ability to make decisions about its own plans and schemes and projects that are put in place. It most probably won't do too much, but you know, as an elected member body with this as an issue, and to Councillor Jones' point, feeling like we're sleepwalking into something, it's most probably a point that we need to put on our radar pretty quickly and understand how we might be able to you know, put our position forward to the state and others, and work with other local governments to look to address how, you know, if you like, the decision-making ability of local governments is being undermined by those processes. But yeah, still halfway as to whether I support this one.
Thanks, Councillor Mofflin. Any further speakers on the amendment? Otherwise, we'll go to Councillor Archibald to close. I'd probably just express before Councillor Archibald does that I was in a similar sort of frame to Councillor Mofflin in terms of also thinking about the renewal of planning frameworks and whether we've done that in a sufficiently timely way to ensure that we are all on the same page about what should go where and what shouldn't go where. But you know, likewise, there's no harm in reiterating our desire to have some control over the planning process. So, Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. I was just wondering for a moment whether I should have tried a refusal, but never mind. We've got what we've got. I think with this particular one, as Councillor Groom said, or maybe it was Councillor Jones, that you know, this area has 4 stories as its height limit, and the proposal is 6. elsewhere in the city, we're facing ridiculously out of order height increases, and that does concern me. So I'm flagging this one, but I think we seriously need to earnestly battle any of those other ones that are way outside the normal scheme that we have. And if there is to be some approvals through the state process and the state sort of push back, I think I think we're going to have to do something about just how we manage that and how we get this on the radar, because Fremantle for decades has been preserved because of height limits, and while I think people looking at the western part of the city and other parts of the city are more relaxed, and that's why our scheme reflects that. The kinds of proposals that are coming in at the moment are just out of reasonable order. So I think there is a lot more work to do, as Councillor Jones said.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. So I'll put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Back to the item as amended. Any further discussion? Nope. Okay, I'm going to put the item as amended. All those in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Sorry? Oh, yep. So I couldn't hear anything then. Oh, maybe it's working. No, it's not working. We'll just get Councillor Lang back. While we're getting Councillor Lang back, could I invite you to have a look at your run sheets and think about which items you would like to speak on? Perhaps circle those, because I'm going to do a quick whip through to see what we might be able to move on block. Councillor Jones is ready. All right, so I'm just going to run through them if you can let me know if you'd like to speak on the items. The row 8, row 9 corridor planning study. Yep. The triangle. Yep. WALGA, best practice governance review. Okay. CEO performance review committee. Okay, so we've got see items 2, 3, ticketing service for the Arts Centre. 5, we can add that in. FAC roof, Arts Centre roof. Budget amendments. So we can. Yep, so we can pull those to vote separately. The Southwest Metropolitan Alliance Environmental Forum Plan. Councillor Lang. The third, the monthly financial report, statements of investment, schedule of payments. Just pull all 3 of them. Just the monthly financial reports, the statement of investments, schedule of payments. Okay, so in my thinking, we have, I'm going to move on block. See item 2, 3, 5, 10, 11. Yep, that's what I've got. Cool. I will move those. Could I have a seconder for those? Councillor Archibald had her hand up first. And all those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay. Go us through. Oh, sorry, and no, don't worry, just ignore me. So we'll go back to the row 8 and 9 corridor planning study. So I'll move the committee recommendation. Or do you want to, maybe Councillor Jones, I might throw back to you on this one. Tell us what happened at committee.
I don't think it was discussed. It was just the officer's recommendation went through as unaltered. No?
No, because was there an amendment from Councillor Sullivan?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
So we, sorry, I can't remember now whether we, yes, sorry, there's discussion whether the amendment should come here or not, and we decided it was a better process to include the amendment whilst not necessarily agreeing with it, because the amendment would then go into the agenda for everybody to see. So this comes from the committee as a recommendation, but it includes an amendment which doesn't contradict any of the original recommendation, it simply amplifies it. So we thought on those grounds it was a late amendment. Sorry, that's why the confusion was. It was a late amendment, but I allowed it because it wasn't controversial and it was better to have it in the agenda than coming up tonight. Okay. And we knew that.
So you're moving
Councillor Sullivan
committee
wasn't going to be here.
recommendation,
I'll
Councillor
move it
Jones,
as an
and
amended recommendation.
seconded
Yeah.
by Councillor Archibald. Okay. Did you want to carry on?
No, it's fairly self-explanatory.
Okay, good. Councillor Archibald, did you wish to speak? Did anyone else wish to speak?
Apologies, I
Councillor
did call
Graham.
this because I was trying to clarify
What happened?
the history of all of that, and acknowledge Councillor Sullivan's work in putting this amendment together.
Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I suppose, regardless of the recommendation or not, that from a City of Fremantle perspective, our relationship with the City of Coburn is important on this matter, and what that land looks like in the future and what particular schemes might be in place. So, yeah, regardless of what's on the page, I think there's plenty of work to be done in terms of building that relationship with the City of Coburn and the land uses in and around that land.
Perhaps to follow on from that, I mean, certainly I'm always a little bit reluctant about telling our neighbours what we think they should be doing via motion, but I think because this does broadly align with some other planning thinking that's gone on already, it's okay. We are talking about this at the Perth Southwest Metropolitan Alliance level because I think that's the most appropriate forum to have these kind of conversations. And we had Peter Tinley, who's running this process on behalf of the Minister for Planning, come and talk to us at our last meeting with a view to kind of starting a bit of a dialogue internally about how both things like green corridors, but also you know, road connections, future roads in the context of Westport. You know, there's a lot of big things that traverse this area, and how might that look in the future. And the strong feedback from him was if there's a united council view about it, it's got to get a lot more traction with government. So that's where that is sitting at the moment. Anyone further? Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, and apologies for being late to the meeting. I just wanted to speak in support of this, and I guess very wholeheartedly, and I guess particularly picking up on the point just made, and I do acknowledge, you know, having a view on land that we don't have control of as such, you know, and telling our neighbouring partners what to do, etc., is not necessarily appropriate. But for me, what's really powerful about this, and special about this, is, you know, we worked alongside our neighbours in the City of Coburn to make sure that a road didn't go through there, and so it's kind of wonderful. Well, and we articulated various kind of aspects of a vision of what we would like to see instead, and it's really exciting to see, you know, that articulated here and starting to come together. And I think we were really fortunate to work so closely with our neighbouring colleagues throughout that process of trying to save it, so that we get to collaborate now on, you know, helping form the vision of what it should be in the future is awesome.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton. All right, if there's nothing, oh, yep, Councillor Archibald. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, look, Councillor Sullivan and I had a few chats about this particular issue, which is why we were keen for it to come to council. And although I acknowledge we've only got a tiny little bit of land that's under the discussion of this amendment, sorry. Does anybody else wish to speak for a minute?
That's fine, Councillor Archibald. We can take a short moment while you have a drink of water. And I have cough lollies in my office, should it be required. Did anyone else want to speak on the item?
It'll keep me short. The thing is that Clontarf Hill does have reasonable vegetation that's still indigenous to the area. It also links with Manning Park, which is a part of the Beelia Regional Park. Quite frankly, Clontarf Hill could well be a part of the Beelia Regional Park. There's plenty of justification for that, I think. It's also a very important route for black cockatoos, which are many of which are endangered species. Certainly the carnabies. The other thing is with Manning Park, particularly on the ridge, we've seen the regeneration of that land over some 70 years, and it's been quite phenomenal how that land still retained its seed bank and did grow back. So I think when we see land that's perhaps a little bit scruffy around the edges and all the rest of it, so long as it still retains a lot of its natural landform and does have some of its natural vegetation, the capability of that land to regenerate is huge, and I think is really significant. So I think the thinking has to change, along with all of our other discussions that we're going to have on climate change and how to build resilience in our landforms and urban bush and all the rest of it, that every single little piece of this kind of land is important. So just to the south of Clontarf Hill, we've got the stables, and around that area there's still quite a number of quite lovely tree areas, and that's been tagged to be reserve for bush. So having that connection, and then it connects across to Manning Park and then into the Beelia Regional Park, I think is really significant. So I think overall, we're not really trying to tell our neighbours how to, we're telling the state government at this point. And I've got a feeling our neighbours wouldn't be too, too upset by this particular view. I think they're pretty much running in tandem with us on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Jones. Oh, welcome, Councillor Thompson. Yeah. Right, I'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Councillor Groom, I didn't see your hand go up, but I will assume that it did. It's fine, thank you. Okay, that's going to bring us to the Fremantle Arts Centre roof. I'll move the officer's recommendation. No, hang on, did I miss something? Triangle, thank you. I was catching up with myself there too. So I'll move the officer's recommendation for PC 13, the triangle. Seconded, unless Councillor Jones wants to, or you can second it, Councillor Jones, if you want to. There you go. Someone wished to speak on this. Do you want to press your Councillor Lorber and then Councillor Graham? Councillor Lorber.
This was a deal that was well and truly done before I was elected to this council, and I just want to kind of put this on the record, I guess, as public comment, and that we're once again giving up $90,000 in parking revenue to for a private business to have a nice front area, and it could be a really great addition to the city. But that loss of revenue is not being offset, so we're going to have to find another way to fill in that gap that's going to be created. And also, just a quick comment on the space itself, because as everyone knows, there's those little grass patches where people sit and all these things, and it's being replaced by granite pavers, granite sets, decomposed granite, engineered stone paving, limecrete paving. There's an interpretive concrete inlay. So there's a lot of concrete that's going to be going into this area. So while I'm not going to oppose this that's going forward, I just wanted to put that comment out there because we're giving up revenue forever into the future, and we're replacing what's there with a lot of really hard surfaces. So we'll see how it goes, and that's pretty much it.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I've been away and I had a quick look at this one, and for a small piece of land, it's a complicated little manoeuvre. You need to be a Philadelphian architect to understand the plans that were given to us on Big Tin Can Hub, and I spoke to the director today, and I'm still really none the wiser. They had a conceptual plan that showed things like the Jericho statue, where the prison was, where the warders' cottages were, and what they were actually putting into there. It certainly would have been a lot better, but I don't know what transpired at the committee meeting. obviously Councillor Lorber may have said a few words. But along the same tack, I mean, okay, back in May 2018, it was 90,000 per annum the council was going to lose on this. 4.5 years ago. I mean, we're mostly up to $110,000, $120,000 a year now. Now, this is a win for Silverleaf and a huge loss for the city. And I just think the council of today would most probably make a different decision about this. I think there's a few more people around the table now that are a bit more savvy on the dollars that we spend. No disrespect to anyone, but that's my feel. And of course, during the COVID period, our parking revenue was down significantly. And this is certainly going to just continue that little downward spiral of parking revenue. As for the actual design, I still can't work it out, and I'm not going to attempt to. Councillor Lorber summed it up for me, and so did former Councillor Dowson. Certainly does nothing for me. As I said, it's a big win for Silverleaf and a big loss for the city. I don't think we can 90,000 or 110, 120. There's good salary there a year, and in 10 years, you know, you're up to $1 million. 10 years goes by very quickly, and for this to have Silverleaf have a nice entry statement to their courthouse bar and restaurant, well, it's all well and good, you know, but there's plenty of other places that have got car parks out the front of their pubs and restaurants and hotels and churches and, you know, you name it. And do they try and get the council to do away with it and make a lovely little park, which no doubt will be held responsible to maintain, mow the lawns, clean the pavers, clean up the drunks, you name it. It'll be the city doing that, won't be the Silverleaf people. I would have preferred this one to perhaps come back to the IEM, given the time lag. I've talked myself into not supporting this one, and I would really like a lot of other people not to support it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Look, I just wanted to speak a little bit in favour of this, to the extent that the key thing about the cobbles that are in this is the alignment with the ramp that goes up to the prison, and the fact that this road, the original ramp, did come right across the road. In fact, the Parry Street ring route, was put in by Jeremy Dawkins when he was the city planner at the City of Fremantle as a way of trying to make the traffic flow around Fremantle a little bit more efficient. But what it did do was cut through the ramp that comes down from the prison, which is now part of a World Heritage listing. So to at least have the imprint of where that alignment was reinstated with the cobbles, for me, is a really important thing. And what I'd like to see happen, and we can see if Silverleaf will fund this one as well, put it across the road and link it back up with the ramp, so that visually we have that link back. So that is the purpose of the cobbles. It's to clearly define where the ramp used to go, and that's the purpose of it. So I'm quite happy to lose some money out of our revenue and go and find another piece of corner somewhere and stick some car parking onto it if we can. But to have this reinstated as public space that does reflect the original alignment of the ramp, for me, is quite an important piece of the puzzle. And hopefully we'll continue to try and get the funding to take it right across the road.
Yeah, I'm interested by this debate because I just thought I was being grumpy. I also am wondering kind of how this deal came about. But on the other hand, I don't love the use of that corner for car parking. So I'm not going to defend car parking staying there, but I am wondering why on earth we are agreeing to so much more hard surface when I find that part of Fremantle already very sparse and hot. And, you know, if there's a negative mood in the room, should we be pushing for a kind of more shade or more green outcome, notwithstanding the comments about the ramp, which I think seeing that kind of continuity would be a good outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. I might go to the Director of Planning, etc., to maybe make a bit of a comment about how we got to here.
Thank you through the chair. It has actually been a very complex, long, and at times tortuous journey to get to this point in terms of the design. I have to say, I think UDLA have finally delivered the goods. We've had a lot of expert design work or review of this work, including heritage architects, urban designers, engineers, and it hasn't been accepted lightly in terms of the composition of how much grass, trees. For someone who wants more trees, you get a heritage architect saying less trees because of the view. This is an extraordinarily complex piece of design in a very small patch of dirt. And of course, originally there was no grass at all. So if we take the heritage line, we should bitumize the whole thing, which was what happened at the bottom of the ramp. So it has been long in the making. In terms of design, we're comfortable that it is doing all the right things in terms of balance, in terms of heritage, urban amenity, and just making this little corner a little bit nicer.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. And yeah, I guess I do recall where this came from, and it's certainly not about giving Silverleaf a big windfall at our expense. It's definitely around improving the public realm and doing that heritage interpretation and the longer term kind of vision for the area that was put forward by the council. I do have some concerns about this. I would have really liked to have seen a perspective, like a render that gave us some comprehension of what it looks like from the point of view of being a human, because it is very hard to interpret at present. So I'm inclined to move a deferral so that we can see more pictures and get a better understanding. I also understand that, the issue of sightlines, like I know the prison has been requesting council for some time to prune back the Moreton Bay figs in the oval so that you can see the prison from that location and so on, because of the historic ramp and the way it would have been, etc. But I also share Councillor Lover's concerns around potentially creating a really inhospitable area, and thinking about what's been put at the other end of the ramp in terms of that end of Fairbairn Street, where it is just nothing but concrete pretty much, and it's an area you pass through pretty quickly, but you wouldn't actually stop and linger in at all. And so I don't want to undermine the heritage importance of this, but I also think that it is an important spot where we create an opportunity for people to sit down and rest, and I'm not sure that this includes it yet, but that's partly because I can't fully comprehend the drawings. I'm sure other shade structures, permanent shade structures, are not going to be suitable or appropriate. Trees, whether they're going to damage the sightlines and that sort of thing. But how do we make sure this isn't just a heat sink?
All right. Well, I will note the idea of moving a deferral, and I'm hearing that there is not a lot of urgency necessarily to get this one done. So we might just continue with the debate to hear what other people have got to say as well. So, Councillor Vusic.
Look, I'm with Councillor Graham. I think every time we lose an income-bearing asset in the city, it needs to be balanced off how we are going to make it up. Whether it's a 90,000, 120,000, we whittle away our finances and we basically outsource it to the next generation to solve for us. So I do think we need to take it seriously. I think there are some really good heritage issues in the connectivity of that realm, which I think have got a lot of merit. But this one just doesn't bring it over the line. And obviously in 2018 we weren't here, so there was probably a lot of other debate that was going on. So if anything, a deferral would be good.
All right. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, thank you. Here I'm on the same page as Councillor Graham, Councillor Vusic. Well, I struggled. I struggled with this one, and while I accept that the public realm and the heritage aspect of this is really important for this area, I struggle to, when you look at the fact that we're losing potentially $90,000 per annum, and that just struck me straight away, and I'm not convinced with what it's being replaced with. and then to read the financial implications, that there are no financial implications to the city from this report. I just find that I don't just think that's accurate. So yeah, I'm quite comfortable with the idea of the deferral as well.
Turn your mic off. Thank you. All right, I might speak now because I've sort of did put myself in the order and then continue on with the list. I think we've got to be careful with the mathematics that we're doing here. If all of our car parks were at 100% occupancy, then this would be a real loss of revenue. This is adjacent to car park 1, which I'm fairly sure is at 100% occupancy a couple of times a year, perhaps, when we have massive events in the city. But whether we get the revenue because people are parked in car park 24 or in car park 1, it's not necessarily lost revenue. It's revenue that might have been paid through a different machine. The other part of the equation is, if I recall correctly, this was part of the approval of a new rate paying development that is going into this site. So while it's not probably well reflected in the report, obviously we will be getting rate revenue from the redevelopment of those waters cottages and the associated buildings. So I think we've got to be a little careful throwing around a 90,000, because I don't think that's necessarily real. And just on the other point around the heritage, I mean, I too am really interested to see probably slightly better renders of what this might be. I know that this has been in consultation with the prison, and I know very, very strongly, as part of their listing as World Heritage Area, the views to the prison are a significant contributor to that. So certainly I've had the requests about trimming back those trees as well, because that's an issue. So I think we have to just be aware of that in how we review the plans. But I'm comfortable if there's no urgency for there to be a deferral moved. Councillor Archibald, you had a question.
Yeah, it's just a question. In fact, it relates exactly to what you were saying. My question was, it'd be interesting to look at how much rates we were collecting now because the old courthouse and other activities are going into that site. So we may be offsetting one source of revenue for another. So if it does get deferred, it'd be interesting to bring some of that back to the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thanks. Yeah, I acknowledge it's certainly not an insignificant amount of money that we are discussing, but being part of this process and part of the approval for this development all those years ago, we're getting an entirely new precinct built in the middle of Fremantle on a block that's been locked up for years. If anyone's had the opportunity to walk through this site, through the middle of it, it already feels great to shortcut through there, and it's going to feel even better when you've got a direct line of sight through the prison. It's going to draw people in, and it's going to create a whole new precinct for our residents and for visitors. Onto the parking itself, obviously our strategic objective is to move car bays out of the middle of Fremantle, and this is part of that. If we weren't doing that, years ago there used to be a car park literally out the front here, and now there's a playground. So getting cars out of the middle of Fremantle is an objective for a number of amenity and safety, and this is part of that direction that we're taking. So I'm in support of this change, this development, and in terms of the deferral, that was drafted so we could view the finer detail, and I would be in support of that.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, I think I missed you on the list.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously councillors here who are not party to this decision, and there are probably councillors here who were not in Fremantle when the Paris Street extension was built, and it was one of the most controversial things of its day. It was the biggest council meetings I'd seen at the time. Jeremy Dawkins was called planning officer, I think it's called something else, development officer, I think. His brother was the MP, and he actually got involved and threatened the council if they didn't agree with Jeremy's grand plan for Fremantle, that they wouldn't get any more help from the government and things like that. It was a huge meeting, I remember, and it became a kind of a massive issue. I think now we see it. We say, well, what would have happened if it wasn't built? But it was incredibly controversial. I mean, the whole of the markets, the football oval and the prison were all joined together as a pedestrian space with no roads, and the ramp went straight from maybe the beginning of this triangle straight up to the prison, and that was one of the issues. And if we could find it, there was a comment made that the steps that replaced the ramp would become as famous as the Spanish steps in Rome. And there was a photograph on the front page of the Herald which showed about 500 people sitting on these steps eating ice creams. I've never seen a soul sit on the steps ever since. And I wish we could find that. It was literally a front page Herald photo. And I think ever since then, there's been this sense of loss by a lot of people that ramp was a very important thing. They talked about putting a tunnel under the ramp and a bridge and various things. But so the driver for this is not to, a free hit for Silverleaf. The driver for this is to reinstate that important visual and pedestrian connection from the city to the prison. And I think the mayor's comments are absolutely right. We often say this car park loses $90,000 a year. Well, it only does if they don't park somewhere else and if every other car bay is full. We had a similar thing when they talked about parklets. Parklet costs us, if you multiply the number of hours in a day by the cost per hour by the number of bays and assume they're all full. But if they just go across the road into a much nicer, shadier car park, and they get used to that, instead of driving in, that's a terrible car park. I mean, to get in and out of, any sizable vehicle can't come out of there without crossing to the wrong side of the road. So I think that background, I'm happy to defer it just to get better results on the design if that's necessary. But in deferring, I would still support it when it came back.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll actually move a deferral to get further information.
Someone had to do it. All right, seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favour? Well, thank you for allowing us to get the other views on the table, because I think it's a deferral that's probably more useful. And is anyone against the deferral? Councillor Graham is against. Just against it. Okay, not a problem. Thank you. All right, so that gets us out of planning and into the Arts Centre roof, I believe. So I'll move the officer's recommendation for that one. Seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Discussion, Councillor Moughlin?
Yeah, I just wanted a comment from staff in regards to the heritage aspect of replacing the roof with the material that it's being replaced with.
Over to you.
I'll have a go answering that through the chair. I do know that our own heritage consultants have looked at it, and they've given it approval for metal. They've also consulted with the Heritage Council that have given it the nod as well.
Do you wish to add anything further to that? Perhaps if I could just layer a question on that. Am I right in saying that this is the final part of a project that's already replaced a large amount of the roof?
My understanding is this is the last part of a series of projects that have occurred in the past.
Thank you. I've lost track. Councillor Groom, I think it's over to you if Councillor Moughlin's done.
Yeah, I'm finding this one tricky because I do think it's it's a less than ideal outcome. On the other hand, so is the roof leaking into the Arts Centre, which has been going on for a number of years and rolled several times because of budget constraints. So I'm certainly in favour of the something rather than nothing approach, and I also do understand that the same changes have already been made in other parts of the building where perhaps it's less visible. So that change to the street frontage, I acknowledge wholeheartedly the concerns that we've heard today in the room, and wish there was a different way. But I will be supporting this because the other outcomes and the damage to the building from leaking, we can't continue to sustain.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, just a bit of context on this one. Way back in the day when we had the Heritage Advisory Committee, and that was around the time that the prison was trying to get the World Heritage listing, the one of the contributing factors was the art centre, and at the time, Agnieszka Kiera, who was the heritage, everyone knows the name, they may not know her, but she was a real heritage warrior. She was trying to get the art centre listed as a World Heritage Site as well because of its relationship with the prison, which goes back in history in a whole lot of time, so I won't go into that. So it is a very important building. It's not to be understated, the importance of it. And I mean, if we still had somebody like Agnieszka Kiera around Fremantle today, she'd still be pushing for this to be part of the World Heritage List along with the prison. So look, I'll support it. I think it's going to look rather cheap and nasty. You know, I don't know what the answer is, but as I said, it's an important building, one not to be taken lightly. And if there was another way, I suppose that'd be the best way. But I don't have a wand to do that.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillors, if there's no one further, Councillor Kamada.
Just a question.
Right.
Yeah, because Councillor Groom, I think, summed it up that it would be lovely to see perhaps clay tiles on the roof, that resemble more closely what was original, but it's also being damaged by the leakage. And I'm just wondering if there is a comparison in cost between. Did I miss that somewhere along the line? Is it a lot more expensive to do that compared to the tin? Is that part of the reasoning?
Probably have to go back to the original decision for the tin roof replacement to find that. I'm thinking. I don't know if either of you have a. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. All right. Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, I seem to be jumping in all the time, but look, I agree in an ideal world that originally this building had she oak shingles, and that would have been the best outcome. But the roof is 2/3 done. It's already that's a new roof. I mean, it's not very old, and this is just the last part of the project to get the roof reinstated. So I think while it's not reflecting its heritage, I don't know that even clay tiles is. I mean, it would have to be something that looked very like she oak shingles to really do the job in heritage terms. So I think for the time being, this is a reasonable outcome, and perhaps one day in the future, if Fremantle's a much more affluent city and we've got more rates, we could go and not chop some she oaks down. I think that's not really what we want to do, but somehow put something back that's more appropriate.
Well said, yeah. All right. I think we're ready to put this one to a vote. All those in favour? Yep. And against? It looked like everyone in favour. Yep, unanimous. Good. Okay. That's bringing us to budget amendments. So I'll move the officer's recommendation for that one, seconded by someone. Councillor Graham, thank you. Someone wish to speak on this one? Yep. Oh, that was it. Okay, so we'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against and carried. The C item 8, which is the SWICDIF. I don't know if it's still called that. Councillor Lang, you wish to speak on this one, so I'll move that if you'd like to second it. And you or Councillor Lawver making. Someone press a button somewhere, would you?
Sorry for the confusion. Councillor Lawver and I are working on this together. Obviously, we're members of the group. I just wanted, first and foremost, Councillor Lawver's suggestion during the meetings. One of them we had was to, is there ever an opportunity to bring some more of these items through to our councils for endorsement? And we thought this would be the perfect one to bring through. That's why I thought Councillor Lawver might move it. So thanks very much for suggesting that. What we're looking at the moment, what we're voting on, is a culmination of months of work that the group put together, and the group being both elected members and staff members from the collective councils. When I was voted as chair of the group, I think we really hit the ground running to try and re-energise and understand what actually is the vision and what is the mission of this NRM group that we're working with. And through a series of facilitated workshops, we wanted to understand what is important to you and your community, what similarities do our communities have, and of these similarities, what are things maybe we can work on together? What are going to be the biggest impact? What are the most achievable, and what can we work on now? And in the attachments, you'll see there's a full list of our objectives and new mission statement and a new vision for the group. And we're looking for ways now which we can collaborate for the greatest outcomes for the environment, but also greatest economic efficiencies across boundaries as well. And that's what this package is. So hopefully we can start coming through council with some more collaborative environmental projects to deliver better outcomes and better efficiency, because we are all working in similar areas, similar goals, but perhaps double costing and double handling a lot of those tasks. So that's what we're voting on.
Thank you, Councillor Lang, and well said. And I think likewise through the Perth Southwest Group, forum that this reports to, there's probably some opportunities to get some of those specific priorities on the table of the mayors and CEOs as well. So, of which I'm no longer chair, FYI. It's rotated annually and it's gone to the Mayor of Kwinana. Yep. All right. Thank you for that. Councillor Orver, anything to add?
Well, no, I think Councillor Lang said pretty much everything. For me, being new to council and being new on this group here, I just felt it was important if we're working on some, objectives and some outcomes with other councils, that everyone across and around this table was aware of what we were pushing for. So I thank you for including on the agenda.
Thank you. All right, all those in favour? Great, that's unanimous. And that brings us to the monthly financial report. I will move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Groom. Did we want to speak on this or vote separately? I'm not sure. Speak? Wouldn't be Christmas.
Yeah, look, I don't mind who answers some of these questions, but it is done in the spirit of understanding the information that's been provided for us. On page 113 of the agenda, I'm going to look at the word surplus. And sometimes I think perhaps it's just that we have different meanings and expectations of a particular word. We have got a estimated budget, a surplus of 5.9 million. I'm not going to look at any of the other figures, just 5.9 million. How does the council define a surplus? I'm happy for Mr.
Right, is it
Mr. Hammond to,
or, I'm not sure. So you're asking a question of the director as to how do we define
how do you define a surplus?
Okay.
In this case, opening surplus is the funds we still have available to carry forward. The favourable surplus of 5.9 that's described is money in addition to the original amount carried forward. Sorry, I'll just clarify, unallocated money.
Unallocated money. Okay, so if I put forward that in a government context, budget surplus is basically considered leftover after tax revenue or after government programs are fully funded. And that can be brought back to a local government standard of, ratepayers and have community programs. So when I have a look at, then I look at the next paragraph and it says the favourable variances which contributed to the 5.9 million is the Fremantle Golf Course project, 3 million, which is on hold. The Port Beach Coastal Adaptation Project, which has been postponed for 3 million. The Markets Building Services Project, still in negotiation, of 2.3 million. The Burrimbarra Park Bike Trail, 1.4, and the Naval Stores of 0.9 million. I look at this, and that gets up to about 8.6 million. Are we saying, if we're talking about a surplus, are we saying that the Burrimbo Park Trail is not going to get done? So we're going to chuck that 1.4 million into a surplus, which basically is unencumbered. And that same logic would apply to each one of those items that are listed there, because my understanding is that these projects are going to get done.
Is that a question
at
that point?
Are these projects? They're part of the 5.9 million surplus, and the reason why we have the 5.9 million is the favourable variances which have been contributed and listed here. On page 113, it says 11.7 million, but okay, let's just look at the ones that have been listed. I'm interpreting this as the bike trail will get built, so you can't use 1.4 million this year to something else. I am interpreting this to mean that the Port Beach Coastal project has been earmarked for 3 million. I know that there's some grants that are going to come in, and that's going to be another factor. But my assumption when I look at a surplus is it's unencumbered. This suggests to me that it is already encumbered, and therefore counting it as a surplus isn't really a surplus. And that's where I struggle with the figures.
Okay, so we'll maybe get a response to that. I don't know whether you want to try to just ping pong here.
Through the Mayor. So the projects you refer to under that capital expenditure 11.7 million paragraph, yes, they were scheduled and budgeted for in the prior financial year. They weren't carried out, so they're now scheduled and budgeted for this financial year. The money that wasn't spent as a result of not delivering those projects in the prior financial year has also been carried forward to this financial year and makes up part of that opening position.
So just to follow up on that. So page 113 and 114 reflects the $14.8 million conversation, not
yes.
the 5.9.
But you referred to, and this is what I don't want to complicate things, it's really the 5.9 because you took away 8.9 from the previous budget and it left you with 5.9. So I just took that figure. It's not unencumbered. Now, I'm not going to labour the point. It's not unencumbered. It's not an additional 5.9 million that we have to spend because it's new money. And then when I link it to the meeting documents on page 89.
Just point of clarification, just because I'm not sure that answer was clear enough. Is it correct that the 5.9 is unencumbered and the 8.9 is the encumbered carry forward? Okay, thank you.
So, sorry, what was that again?
Do you want to? So the 5.9 is unencumbered. The 8.9 is the one that's encumbered by those projects that are listed that have been carried forward across the financial year.
Okay, thank you. My next link is page 89 of 122 of the meeting attachments. Then can you explain why the investment reserve fund is showing a negative of 160,000? Because if we've got 5.9 million, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, Councillor Vusic, we're going to take these ones on notice, and I would just remind everyone that you, as elected members, have an opportunity to submit questions beforehand, and the benefit of doing that is not only so officers can prepare, but so that other elected members can come to the meeting considering what you've brought forward. It's a meeting practice that I would highly encourage next year that we adopt. To do anything other than that can kind of result in what feels like gotcha moments for the officers, which as a board equivalent as a council, we don't have an opposition and a government. We have a collaborative working process. And I really would encourage that behaviour next year to be around submitting questions beforehand so that officers and so other elected members can be prepared.
Well, what's the point of producing agendas and meeting attachments where we work on the basis that you've read them? I'm just clarifying that for me, the chamber is the holy grail of transparency. They're not difficult questions at all. Not difficult questions at all. So it is done in the spirit of collaboration. It is done in the spirit of continuous improvement. Absolutely. And I have submitted questions before.
Sorry,
They're
you
not
submitted
difficult.
these questions before?
Not these, but I have
Okay.
submitted others,
Right.
and
Well,
I'm
we'll
none
take
the
these ones
wiser
on
from
notice.
them.
Thank you.
Okay. So is it okay if I ask a few questions then?
Yep, and we'll put them, I suspect, on notice, but go on.
Okay. As elected members, I certainly struggle, and I'm sure a number of us also do, to adequately make sense out of the monthly financial information, which are mostly due to the accrual, not engaging in proper accrual accounting. Now, I've got to acknowledge...
Point of order, Madam Chair. These are questions, so could we have the questions?
Okay, the question is this. We need monthly cash inflows and cash outflows to properly make sense out of the finances. I think it would go a long way. I posed this question at the last OCM, and I said, in the interest of transparency, why can we not have those two aspects of our finances reported every month? It would add clarity, a lot of clarity. Can I have an undertaking that this would be done?
I don't know that we're really clear on what the implications of that would be. What was the answer we gave last month?
Yeah. Through the Mayor, as we said last month, we're happy to look into how we undertake that, and we can come back to you with some information on how that might be possible.
Just procedurally, I think I would be interested in understanding, before we took such a decision, whether there's any implications for resourcing, staffing, so in a sense, perhaps something like that should come up as a motion or something so we can actually evaluate what are the implications in terms of, is this something we specifically want to resource?
I'm happy to progress it. It's going to give us an outcome.
Yeah, well, perhaps that is one way to look at progressing that in the new year.
Okay, I've got a number of other questions, but I'll actually hand them in. Seems to me that there's no appetite for the questioning.
Thank you. Councillor Groom.
Yeah, just kind of, I think we need some clarity on the level of detail that's expected, and also to go back to, a clear understanding of our roles as councillors, which is nose in and fingers out. Having been on other boards and management committees, it's not the role of a board to scrutinise every transaction of council. It's to understand at the high level and keep oversight of the financial position and key decisions that are being made. So I do think we need to be very careful that we are not going down a path that is actually not consistent with the role and the purpose of the elected council.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. All right, I think we're probably ready to put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against, and that is carried. Wishing you all a safe and healthy Christmas and New Year's, and we will see you again at some point in January. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed at 7.